Croom.
Present.
Lahanis.
Present.
Ballline.
Here.
Clark.
Present.
Hackney.
Present.
Kruger.
Here.
Livingston.
Present.
And Smith.
Here.
All right.
Thank you, Adam. So we do have a quorum. We will move on to item 1.2 on our agenda. We have an agenda as presented by staff. A motion to approve the agenda would be in order. It's been moved by Luke Hackney, seconded by Michael Kruger. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, the agenda has been approved as presented. We did receive a letter from Jill Rhode, who has accepted a position with the city of East Lansing. And so her letter is a resignation from the board and resignation as treasurer. So I will move to accept her resignation and ask for a second.
Luke Hackney, support.
Luke Hackney, a second. All those in support of Jill's resignation say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. And we need to elect a new treasurer. I will put Michael Kruger's name in nomination to become the new treasurer of the BRA and ask for a second.
Greg Ballline, second.
And seconded by Greg. All those in favor of Michael serving as treasurer, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you, Michael, for agreeing to serve in that capacity. We do have item 1.5. It is a adoption of time limits with regard to public comments under communication section of our meeting. I know at our last meeting, we changed from a 2-minute to a 5-minute limit. I presume that is the wish of the Brownfield Authority today, and I ask for a motion.
I'll make that motion with that amendment to 5 minutes.
Okay, it's been moved by Luke Hackney,
Second.
seconded by Greg Ballline. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we will adopt that as part of our communications from the audience. We do have written communications. Item 2.1, we have an email from Alice Drager. I also have an email from Ralph Monsma. I don't know are there any other written communications, Tom? Tom Fehrenbach?
No. And the communication from Mr. Monsma will be added to the next agenda.
Oh, okay. I just received that this morning, so I want to bring that to the board's attention. We will move on to the communication section from the audience, item 3 on our agenda. And what will happen is city staff will acknowledge individual callers to the board by your last 3 digits of your telephone number. You will be given the opportunity to address the board. You can elect to pass if you wish, and we will allow people to speak in the order in which they call in. So I will turn it over to staff to invite those who wish to address the Brownfield Authority to provide their comments at this time. Is that Adam?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Peter. Caller with the last 3 digits, 164. You will be unmuted and given 5 minutes to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please say pass.
Welcome, caller. Do you wish to speak?
Adam, you broke up on the last 3 digits. You may want to repeat those. I believe they're 164.
164, correct.
Oh, excuse me, that's Ralph Monsma. This is I, and I would like to speak.
Yeah, Ralph, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm not going to take 5 minutes. I'm just going to say thank you for the Jill's service on the BRA and as treasurer, and I must commit to having a whole bunch of dates wrong in my material. I was going off the regular board meetings as contrasted to this. The main thing I want to do is thank you all for serving in this particular process. I do have questions about the business agenda for 1 and for 2. And it seems to me that even in the last day, it has changed again. It's almost as though the material, and this is a little bit from what I sent to the 3 people who are on the committee to look at things, it almost seems as though 4.1 is opposition research. And again, this is a thing that's going on at the national level in terms of a term, but it basically has information in there that says that the communication relative to what the city did in 2017 was not correct, and that they have subsequently sent this material in. There's also a part in there where all of a sudden it became a DICOMA document instead of a Miller-Canfield document, and maybe I'm not remembering that right from the last time. And then I just want to say very much that I appreciate the work that Alice Drager did in terms of putting together information and talking with Councilman Meadows and trying to figure out exactly what the situation was. And that is out there, and it seems to me that there's really no specific motion to rescind at this point, and that there is a lot of stuff that has to be covered. And again, the material in the DICOMA material is basically highlighted in certain ways. And I guess, you know, this meeting is going to have to go through a process of trying to resolve the 2 pieces. Anyhow, that's my brief presentation. And I know that this is going to be maybe a stressful meeting, but I certainly hope people keep their, keep a professional attitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mansma. Next caller, please. Adam.
Yes, caller with the last 3 digits, 963. You'll be unmuted and given 5 minutes to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please say pass.
This
Welcome,
is Alice
caller.
Drager. Thank you, Peter. This is Alice Drager. I want to play for you what Mark Meadows and Ruth Byers said last night at council. Remember, these are the 2 people who were on city council at the time the deal was made in 2017 and who put in strict cost control measures to protect the people of East Lansing. That the BRA has apparently not been made aware of these cost control measures until recently is unfortunate. This is the recording from last night.
The deal is that, yeah, if there are overages, they're going to be put to the end of this. They are going to earn interest, but they can only be paid if there's TIF left over. You know, if there's an amount of TIF. And what happened here was that the city council, in passing its resolution approving Brownfield Plan number 24, said, we're approving this Brownfield plan, except that we're only allowing the costs, the eligible costs, to be those costs which relate to public infrastructure that are contained in a specific document, Exhibit N to the Master Development Agreement, and that document lists the cost. It does not include paying the developers, bond counsel, and other attorneys their fees. And so that is the matter of dispute here. There was a subsequent approval of a bond that included those payments, but our approval also limited the TIF to around $50 million, which is the exact amount that was necessary to pay off our costs. So what they're really trying to do is get around the fact that there's a limit on the amount of the TIF that is available to pay any expenses, and it is unlikely, although I think because of the increase in the value of this property, way more valuable than we thought it was going to be, that TIF we probably would be able to pay off some of their overages with the remaining TIF. But at this point in time, there's no reason to change the deal. What they want is they want to change a deal that they signed on to, and the BRA doesn't have the authority to change that deal. Only we do. That's my position.
And now I'm going to play you what Ruth Byers said.
In the BRA meeting, and I fully agree, and I say this publicly so that Mr. Wahanas also hears that the limit is $50 million. So if there are documents that disagree with each other, that's the one that we can stick to, regardless of what our bond counsel says. The next thing.
I was contacted this morning by someone who works in municipal finance who cannot speak to you because of their professional situation. He was alarmed by the situation and has concern that Mr. Leffler violated the MSRB rules last week. MSRB is the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. This person, who is an expert in the area, strongly suggested you should withdraw the bond resolution and do no further bonding resolution until you have a conflict-free financial advisor at the table to advise you. This financial advisor will advise you as to how to get the best deal for the taxpayers. The person calling me is extremely alarmed that you are being sold a concept by the other side who have interests other than the best deal for the city and the taxpayers. He said that under no circumstances should you allow Mr. Leffler to shape and to market the bond for you. Under no circumstances should you have him identify the investor for the new bond. Yes, you can get a lower rate with a refinance. You do not need the developer's team to do that. The reason not to pay the extra cost now, even if you owe them later, is that the bigger you make the bond now, the greater the risk there is insufficient TIF to pay it out, and that means the higher the bond risk becomes to a new investor and the higher the interest rate you will pay. Because the agreements made don't match up, because they are a legal mess, Mr. Danhoff is now in a position where he must protect his own firm. He is therefore advising you that he made no mistakes and you should follow what he said last time. But you should seriously consider having another attorney who can help advise you on this. The DDA is poised to hire an expert in big redevelopment deals soon. Wait until you have that person and also a conflict-free financial advisor on your side. Finally, I find it alarming that the developers are being
30-second warning.
Thank you. Finally, I find it alarming that the developers are being allowed more than 5 minutes during public comment. I do not understand why they are sitting at the table. As Mr. Meadows said last night, they made a deal in 2017. They are no longer open to negotiation on that deal. This matter is a BRA matter, and it should be dealt with only by the BRA. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
See here. Caller with the last three digits, 974. You'll be unmuted and given 5 minutes to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please say pass.
This is Vic.
Welcome,
Vic
caller.
Loomis. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
we hear you. Welcome, Mr. Loomis.
Okay. I am going to make some comments or some observations this morning, if I may, and you may do with them as you please. I am going to listen in again today at the request of several of my fellow and concerned citizens. Let me start with my observations. Although legally you have a non-recourse bond, I submit that functionally there is no such thing. And I emphasize the word functionally. I hope you're paying attention to the functionality of the finances of this project. I believe in part that is what is in play here. I fully expected when I saw this project financial structure that this conversation would occur 2 to 3 years after its completion. I did not contemplate that it would occur 2 to 3 months after its completion. To that extent, I hope that you have the numbers that you need to make a decision. It's hard to tell from this vantage point without documentation in front of me, but professionally, I don't believe you do. Secondly, if you do have those numbers, make sure you understand them. Again, it's hard to tell from this perspective, but I don't believe you do. And the reason I say that is last week, as I listened in, I fully expected certain questions to be asked. They were not. I hope those questions are asked either today or before you make a final decision. That's the extent of my comments. Good luck. We taxpayers are counting on you.
Thank you. Are there additional callers, Adam?
There are no additional callers.
Okay. We will close the public comment section of the meeting. Mayor Stevens, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, I just asked that I think that the development team is on the call, and I'd like for them to have the opportunity to make a public comment if necessary. And then if we have questions for the development team during our conversation, I think that'd be fine. I think that we should have the development team talk during communications from the audience and then respond to questions during the period when we discuss as a VRA the matter. That, of course, is up to the chair, but that is my opinion.
Yeah. So the nature of this meeting, because there likely are going to be multiple questions and an effort to try and manage those questions, the developers will be part of the viewing process, so I can know who to call on. When we begin our deliberation, we will just simply have Brownfield members and our own counsel available for us to ask questions of. So it's more of a management via Zoom, if you will.
Okay, that's understood. I just wanted to make sure that I give them an opportunity, like if they wanted to make general statements, not necessarily responding to questions itself, but general statements about what's been talked about so far, what others have said, that they get that opportunity to do that, during public comment, because I would assume that when we're having the conversation, they'll be responding to specific questions rather than overall functions. So I wanted to have that as the opportunity, again, in the realm of public comment. So that's my only point, but I appreciate that, Chair DeWalt.
Right. And it's no different than how council runs their meetings as well. So we will close the public comment section and move on to our business agenda item. Tom Fehrenbach, are you going to
Peter,
into
Greg
the
Ballline. I'm sorry, Peter, Greg
yes.
Ballline. I need a motion to recuse.
Yeah,
Make that
I will
motion.
offer a motion to recuse Greg Ballline. It's been seconded by Mayor Stevens. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Thank you all.
opposed? Mr. Ballline has been recused from this discussion. Thank you, Greg, for bringing that to my attention.
Yes.
And Tom Fehrenbach, will you begin our conversation?
Michael Kruger
Yes.
has his hand up, Peter.
I'm sorry.
Michael Kruger.
Michael, I didn't see you. Michael?
Maybe he's frozen in time.
I don't see Michael on the screen here.
I think he is having technical difficulties.
I just messaged him, let him know.
We will revisit if Michael has a question. Please, Michael, when you rejoin us, just let me know that you'd like to speak. Tom?
Yes, thank you. So this is a special meeting that was called per the bylaws by 3 members of the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to consider a motion to rescind the action from July 9th, your meeting last week. So thank you for kind of your patience with us in terms of the way that the structure of this agenda works. We are still getting used to our new software here. and we thought it most appropriate to queue up the consideration of the motion to rescind. And then if you decide to pass that motion, we have put item 4.2, which really should be kind of a 4.1A, but we could not figure out a way to do that with our understanding of this software. But 4.2 is really the motion or the agenda item copied and pasted from last week's agenda, with the exception of the staff memo, which we thought might confuse folks, so we just removed that. So that is the purpose of today's meeting, and the first item for your consideration is the item that was the purpose for the special meeting.
Okay. So I think what would make sense, I'm going to ask Mayor Stevens, since you had requested the opportunity to have a special meeting of the Brownfield, in addition to others that requested it, Mr. Lahanis and Mr. Kruger, if you wish to begin the discussion of why you request that board meeting.
Sure. So I can speak to that in the first sense, and then I'm happy to hand it over to George and Mike. One of the reasons why I wanted this to happen was I felt as though the conversation last week was fairly stifled, and I had concerns from other council members as well. And truthfully, we had a very long meeting on the subject, but I think that we didn't have a full conversation with the BRA, and I felt as though there might not have been the opportunity for VRA members to fully understand the issue and fully get behind it. And so really what I did is I asked a couple of members of the BRA, did they also feel like that? And the general sentiment I got was yes. And so I said, from a couple of members, I won't speak for everybody, but so I reached out to the chair and I said, hey, we might want to have another discussion on this now that people have had time to process, and a lot of people have weighed in from the public and different things. And so that's why I wanted to have this meeting here. But I will hand it over to George or somebody else.
So George here. So I continue to have concerns, particularly regarding the fees charged, the fees from last time and the fees this time, the combination of the issue. I think that when you look at the fees for attorney fees last time, I think that it was mentioned last time that part of the fees that were charged for the cost of issuance were perhaps part of the fees that DICOMA used in assisting in the entire process. And I don't necessarily think that that's appropriate if that's what happened. But overall, my concerns from last time are the fees charged last time. And then, of course, rolling new fees in this time sort of compounds that concern. I don't think we should pay what we're not due to pay. And if there are reasonable costs of issuance and we can verify that, I think that might well be reasonable according to our attorney, but I'm not sure that's what happened. And I don't want to compound that by paying fees a second time. And the second piece is I still have the concern, and we just want it brought back for final approval. And that's, of course, a decision for the BRA, but that's my view on it.
Okay, and Michael Kruger?
Yeah.
Did you have a comment? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, I just didn't feel like we had, once I saw the letter that Mark Meadows had sent, it felt frustrating to me that it didn't feel like we had all of the information in front of us when we were, going to be making this large decision on behalf of the taxpayer. So I just wanted to, and I expressed that to Mayor Stevens, and thus the letter was sent to the chair. So that was a part of it.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, Tom Fehrenbach. Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to add additional information that as of last week, there was a request of staff to request from our bond counsel, Miller Canfield, a memorandum outlining some of their perspectives in terms of the questions that have been raised. So we did add that into the agenda under 4.1. Also under 4.1, we received a memorandum from the developers representatives, DICOMA, and that has been included in your packet as well.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite the developer and Dykema to offer their comments, and then there may be questions of board members, and then we can follow up with our questions of our council with Miller Canfield following that. So is there someone from the developers team that would like to address Steve Willoughby? Yes,
sir. Well, thank you very much for allowing us to come back before the board to discuss this. Before we dive into the particulars of this, I'd like to restate that we're proud of what we accomplished in East Lansing. I think there's a tone in the conversation that starts off from a number of the comments that get made and the information gets circulated that present the project and the development of what we've done in a negative light. And it puts in a position we're doing something wrong. That is not the case. That is not who we are. It's not how we operate. So with the statements being made, the information has not been brought forth, as well as information being withheld, that just simply hasn't been the case. The reason we requested that Dykema provide the memo in tandem was to make sure that all the information has been presented properly and thoroughly. Harbor Bay is a family-owned company, and when we invest in assets, we look to become long-term holders of those assets. So although Harbor Bay may be located in Northbrook, Illinois, the investment's been completed. The investment is operational, and we're bringing additional businesses such as Jolly Pumpkin, Barrio, Foster Coffee, and others to downtown. So we're no longer just an out-of-state entity or an out-of-state company. We're now part of the community. So when comments continue to arise and get made, making the statement that we did something wrong, I can't think of any other word that's insulting. But that being said, we're back before the board today to go through the questions in good faith. You know, as questions get raised and issues come up, we're always happy to address those. So based on the memorandums that have been provided from Miller Canfield as well as Dykema, I know Miller Canfield could talk through theirs much more thorough than we could. But from a standpoint with Dykema, what we asked our team to do is take a look at this and provide a very clear picture of what's been committed to previously and what is the next steps. And as we shared and talked through last week, under the 2017 bond issuance, the bond has been approved, and through a very structured process and partnership, because this is a partnership, you know, there's a public parking structure that's now operational by the city of East Lansing that was financed by the developer through this 2017 bond. But what we're talking about is simply refinancing costs that have already been approved based on documents that were already approved as well through the council, as well as through the BRA. So although there may be some misunderstanding or an improper recollection of what was committed to, all the documents clearly state, and it's been stated by your council as well as ours, that $55.9 million is available for reimbursement. And that's how the 2017 bond was approved and been placed. So what we're asking for is not some effort or some step to unduly enrich the developer, but what we're solely requesting is refinancing a bond that's currently placed at a 5% interest rate and being in a position to reduce that bond. In last week's meeting, when we discussed this and went through this, I thought it was a very robust conversation. And the conclusion was that we would move forward working with the BRA, with the chair and the vice chair, and the BRA would be securing the services of a financial advisor. I'd like to reiterate something that I think was misinformed or stated inaccurately publicly. Brian Leffler, Baird, is working for us. And we communicated that last week's meeting. He is not the financial advisor for the city of East Lansing. And the outcome of that meeting last week was for the city to hire their own financial advisor. So I just want to be clear on that. So what we're asking for today, the same fashion that we were requesting last week as approved, is a refinancing of the bond, $25.2 million plus accrued interest, to lower that a lower saving and interest rate to the taxpayers, not just the city of East Lansing, but all taxing jurisdictions. And if the board should include or decide to include the additional $822 in cost, there's a savings in that as well. But I want to be clear, we've never stated just take our word for it. When we talked about the financial advisor being incorporated into this last week, we're in support of that. We're in support of going through that step and making certain this is the right deal for the taxpayers. We're investors. We're also a business within the community now, and how this is done is very important to us. So the continued comments being made that we are not looking out for the taxpayer, we take that very seriously. It is, as I stated before, it's very insulting. So we're here today to address questions. I'm joined by Mark Bell, who's our CEO. I'm joined by Brian Leffler with Baird, who's our contracted financial advisor. I'm also joined by Jared Smith with Dykema, as well as Jim Kiefer. So we stand ready to address any questions that you have. If you would like, our team could walk through the memo and go through this, but I think as we go through the conversation, as questions are posed to us, there's you'll see a redundancy in regards to the independent memos that complement each other in regards to verifying the facts. So thank you.
Peter, Chair, can I mention something? George here.
Yes, George, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if that's being represented properly, but I think it's from a different perspective. First of all, I am very favorable on the project. It was a great project. It is a great project. It'll be a great project into the future. We're having a dispute over how we administer this specific these sort of narrow aspects of the bond, and that's what it's sort of left with. But to say that we're refinancing something from the past and there were costs put in, correct. But now with the reissuance, we're going to be putting more costs in. So I think it's completely appropriate for us to say, how much were the costs the first time? Was that what we should have paid? Should the taxpayers be paying a second time for those same costs or for different costs if we were charged? I think the costs were high the first time. And as I mentioned last time, we had some sticker shock over that. And should we be paying for attorney costs for issuance from Dykema a second time? Should we be paying the developer fees from the developer when the city already paid costs in the area of, I don't know if the number, I'm going to ballpark the number if it's $500,000 or $600,000 of costs the first time. Should we be paying additional costs now at this point? We said it was $225,000. I don't think we should be paying those costs, or those costs should be pared back. That's my position on this. So again, the project is great. I'm a big supporter of it, and I'll tell everybody that. But there's a dispute here on how we'd actually administer this bond and what we put into it. And this is what the taxpayers are paying. The taxpayers paid for our attorney to sit at the table. We should not be paying for the developer's attorney to sit at their table for the entire process. If it's cost of issuance, that's one issue. But my sense was, and from what was said last time, I thought it was more than cost of issuance. It was more of a development agreement process. So anyway, that's what I would say.
Mayor Stevens.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to second a couple of things that Mr. Lahanas said. I think he very eloquently put into a statement some of the conversations on fees that I think him and I have had, but I wanted to make one statement towards the development team, and I just want to reiterate, the reason why I wanted this meeting really was because I'm in no way trying to suggest that the developers are attempting to take advantage of taxpayers in East Lansing. I apologize if I did. The reason why I really wanted this meeting, truthfully, was because we have Zoom meetings. We're getting used to the format, and I really felt like the BRA, the people that are responsible to the taxpayers, I mean, really responsible to the taxpayers, didn't get the fair opportunity to have a lot of their questions. Maybe didn't fully go through with some of the written materials that were provided a little bit later in the meeting or later in the week. And just I don't feel like there was a lot of conversation back and forth between BRA members. And so, it wasn't an intention of ill will, but it really is, just kind of a conversation on procedure and public meetings that this board needs to have that opportunity. And so that's the reason why I wanted that extra meeting. But I do think that Mr. Lahanas' comments on fees are things that I agree with. So Tom, I have a question for you, Mr. Fehrenbach, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
So refinancing these bonds, that needs to be done with the developer. We can't refinance on our own without, and pay our own kind of cost of issuance with our own financial advisor. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I would say that's beyond my understanding, and I would have to rely on Mr. Danhoff to answer a question like that.
Okay, then I can direct that question at Mr. Danhoff if he's on and available.
Mr. Danhoff? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just getting the buttons pushed, sorry. The structure of this bond issue in 17 and the structure today is that the developer has been told to bring a bond purchaser to you. That's not to say it couldn't be done another way where you undertook to market the bonds and and put together marketing materials. That's not the way it's been structured. I would say it could be structured that way, but we've tried to structure it in such a way that you're not involved in the direct sale, but more approval of a final proposal that would be brought to you by the developer's team, just like it was in 17. But so it could be done the other way, but that's not the way it was contemplated to be done here.
So Mr. Danhoff, if I could ask a follow-up question, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Mr. Danhoff, just kind of speaking your professional opinion, what's the benefit and to either way or either method?
Well, first of all, in 17, if you have a financial advisor, which you're going to get on board, you would then you could ask the financial advisor. That's a finance question. What is the best way to sell these bonds? I'm trying to say that either way, I think would be permissible from our side. How you want to sell them, but what additional responsibilities would that mean if the city the Brownfield Authority were going to undertake to market these bonds? And what would the financial advisor do? Or would you then also have to bring on a placement agent or an underwriter in addition to the financial advisor to sell these bonds? So you might need another person who actually would do the marketing for you on these bonds. So again, we've tried to not have the city involved or the Brownfield Authority involved in that aspect, and just tell the developer, you come back and then your financial advisor will tell you whether it's a fair deal or not a fair deal.
Sure.
And try and keep you out of the middle of being the seller of the bonds. We're trying to, at least I'm trying to keep you as neutral, saying yes, we'll do it if our people say it's legal, which we could do, pieces tax exempt that we could do, and that this is a fair pricing of the refunding bonds, which your financial advisor that you're going to bring on board could do.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Danhoff. Thank you for answering those questions.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff.
Jeff, go ahead, please.
A couple of questions, actually. Timeline. So if we were to hold off anything until we get council on board, I guess this is for Tom, what kind of timeline are we looking at, Tom and George, for that to occur? The month or 2 months, 6 months?
Financial advisor, you mean?
Yeah.
Tom?
So Mr. Cummins and I have been working very diligently to try to craft an RFP. We found some information from the GFOA in terms of good questions to ask. And we think we can get something on the street in short order with a 2 to 3 week turnaround, and have some financial advisors ready for the next BRA meeting to discuss selecting one of them. So probably 4 to 5 weeks is probably the minimum time frame of where we'd be putting folks in front of the board, and that would be very very aggressive. Okay,
so if I'm looking at trend lines for LIBOR, Freddie Mac, and also some consumer confidence information, the trend lines aren't going up. It should be anticipated that the bond percentage shouldn't necessarily spike over the next month until we get council on board. This is a question for the developers at this point. Are we in a situation where you're at risk for, or if the city's at risk for, any significant uptick in cost or missing out on a great opportunity here from your perspective and your council's perspective, if a month of time is permitted to make a better decision here.
That's a question to the developers.
I think
Mr. Bell?
Mark's got his hand raised.
Yeah, Mr. Bell?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'll be actually pretty brief. Our crystal ball is no different or any better than anybody else's crystal ball on this call. I think it's a good time to refinance. Who knows if, interest rates slightly dip or slightly go up in a month's time. I would say that, in summary, it's our belief that for every day that lapses that these aren't refinanced is actually costing the taxpayers of East Lansing money. I think this is a really healthy conversation, and we completely agree that this needs to be in the best interest of the citizens of East Lansing. Otherwise, that we shouldn't be doing a deal, and your leadership is really to think through this carefully. So I'm gonna actually turn it over to Dykema to maybe opine a little bit about where this deal is. The deal is the deal. Let's let the law speak for the law, and we want to be responsible for the deal that we signed. And then once we establish that and we get the financial consultant on board that represents the city, and then they could presumably correspond and connect with our financial advisor. It's my sincerest hope that we arrive at a deal that saves the city of East Lansing a lot of money, and that's our intent.
Before you turn it over, I do have a couple more questions, if you will.
Go ahead, Jeff.
It is clear that we do not have a great handle at any level at the city or the public on all of the facts. I think it would be wise for us to continue moving forward on moving the memo past where it's at. I greatly appreciate the short turnaround on getting the BRA the information. I greatly appreciate it, staff, to turn around as much information as you have already. I think that the discomfort is a clear indication. I don't think there's a single person on this call, both public and from the members of the board, that are completely at ease with the decisions that have been made. So I think there's an interest here to maybe hold off on, it is from my perspective, hold off on moving forward in any direction until we have a strong counsel on our team to lay out all of the facts, both from the past and as we move forward. If that takes a month, it doesn't sound like it will damage the financial situation for either party. And you might find that in the court of public opinion that everyone is treated fairly at that point. Those are my points.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Mr. Smith, Jared Smith from Dykema, to talk to the memorandum that you provided to the Brownfield.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I also appreciate the comments that have been made. Understood, this is a board meeting. I'm on a school board and understand you need the chance to deliberate and discuss without more of it being a round table. So I'll try to be brief, as well as not being redundant with the points that have already been made by Mr. Willoughby, Mr. Vell, and others. I think those are all good points. Our request today is actually for your inaction. And I know that's not been the theme so far, but I think everything that's being discussed here could go on and continue while we proceed with preparing a bond transaction. For example, last week's decision, and it relates to this memo, authorized your authorized officers to sign on to documents. Certainly, they're not going to do that until they're sure everyone here is comfortable and that the questions that are being asked today are being asked or are addressed. If fees ultimately aren't covered in this new bond transaction, that's part of what's going to be structured while we look for a purchaser. But that decision can be made despite your approval from last week. This was an authorization for bonds. It was not a requirement that you issue them in with everything included. It just set our parameters. We have several legal documents here, which is what this memo outlines that govern despite recollections and despite the many things that were discussed over the course of a year in 2017, leading to the signing of that master development agreement, a complicated deal, but ultimately led to a brownfield plan that's approved at both local and state level, and that set a maximum limit of the $55,952,000 amount of tax increment revenues that can be captured lawfully under Act 381 in that plan. We rely on that as both for the bond. If it stays in force as it is, the 2017 bond is accruing interest at 5% and is accruing at about $3,460 a day. So I guess the only thing as far as timing of the essence, the sooner we can drop this rate, the lower that daily accrual becomes. And again, we're all talking about pledged tax increment revenues. I heard a comment about changing the deal, and no one here specifically has made that. I also want to reiterate the only change, which we do believe is in the city's and the Brownfield Authority's benefit, is to finance the change order costs of about $822,000. We say change orders because we do believe those were eligible activities. We don't believe they were changes imposed by the developer. This was the developer working with the city with modifications, not in the scope, but still on the public side, public infrastructure side, and still for the benefit of the city, making them eligible to be financed. So our proposal for a change was to finance those with this new bond, bringing those costs forward at a lower rate. I think that covers it, other than getting into the discussion with costs, which I certainly understand Mr. Lahanas and others. And so I'll stop there. I think those were the additional points that we wanted a chance to make with respect to the memo, and can answer any questions.
Peter, Jim Croom.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Danhoff. I was going to make some general comments at the beginning, but I think they've all been covered. This is I guess I'll make them anyways, haven't said that, at least in brief. This is clearly a volunteer board of citizens, and we rely on city staff and our expert outside counsel and advisors to apprise us of the state of the law, the state of the financial markets and municipal aspects, and the underlying facts of the issues before us. I think it's clear that during and as a result of last week's meeting, when we passed a resolution, that it was without complete information and without a complete understanding of all the facts. And it also appears that very astute minds disagree on some of the facts and on some of the legal conclusions. So some disappointment there that all the information wasn't shared with this board, but we can take that up with the appropriate parties at a later time. For Mr. Danhoff, you had made comments today on how the refunding of the bond was contemplated, and the original bond placement was contemplated, that the developer would do sort of the heavy lifting and the city would be off to the side and presumably protected in some way, or at least if not protected, not put to the task of doing all the work, but just reaching a conclusion on the fairness. If we elected to take over the role that you described as having been assigned to the developer, are we able to do that under these legal documents and resolutions that are now in place? Can we change that and take over the lead without objection by the developer side? Is that all right?
Yes, this is your bond issue and you can dictate the method of sale. I do think that you should hear from your financial advisor before you would make such a decision as to what's the best thing for the city from a financial perspective. And we can talk to the legal side of this. And then what additional members of the team would you need should the city decide that it wants to undertake the marketing of these bonds? As I said, you may need more advisors than you currently have on board, just because of the restrictions they have on people's ability to market bonds and the like that exist under the Securities Exchange Commission rules. But that's a permissible way to market this thing, and if that's what your officers want in order to sign off on a sale, then I'm certainly we could structure that. Again, it was not what was contemplated, but that's not to say we can't redirect the ship.
Right, and if we took that over, it's clearly understood that we may have to hire an underwriter and other professionals because we're taking that over. But wouldn't those professionals need to be hired by the developers team anyway? And we would be faced with them seeking reimbursement for that?
I don't know everybody that they're purporting to hire to market this and what those costs are. And maybe that's a question appropriately directed to them. But we know they have their financial advisor. I don't know if they were looking at some type of placement agent or underwriter and the like, and whether that's an additional cost that's in the deal. I've not seen that detail.
Okay, and you also intimated, and others have pointed out that, and I can see the logic in this. There's oftentimes a good logic to controlling the placement and the marketing. If we're the primary party that's affected by the bond rates and terms and so on. But I also can understand intellectually how a second party, the developers team, could put that together, and we can shadow them and get opinions on the fairness and so on. That's more of a decision and something that we need to decide down the road. I'm leaning towards doing that process from our side of the table. Second question for you. The bondholder has a put right, if I can put it this way, that we discussed at the last meeting in full, and that's what they're exercising now, making that request.
No, I don't believe they are.
Describe what you think they're doing and what our rights are, and specifically, do we have the right to also refund this bond at any time we wish and pay off the original bonds?
Yeah, in a sense, that's what we're asking to be done now, is to refund them at a lower interest rate. I've not seen any notice from the bondholder, that's not the developer, but from the bondholder, that they intend to put the bonds to you.
So but we're able to make the decision to refinance and take out the original bondholder on our own, even though they haven't requested?
Yeah, and then I assume the new bondholder, the refunding bondholder, we would hopefully not have a similar put, and that would be gone. So you wouldn't have that hanging over your head going forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I saw Jeff Smith, you had a question?
I did. I just want to make sure that we are all crystal clear on where we're at today. The previous resolutions, and please stop me if I'm wrong, previous resolutions granted the authority to move forward on negotiating better terms for the bond only. That was if I were to summarize the resolution to effect, it was to allow for the terms of the bond to be marketed for more favorable terms. Is that accurate?
Mr. Danhoff, are you going to respond?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that was the intent, was that you would be refunding these at a better deal, both as to interest rate and hopefully as to the and get rid of some of these covenants that are in the first deal, particularly the put.
So I'm just trying to make sure that we are all very crystal clear before this call ends, that there is no confusion whatsoever as to what exactly has transpired and where we're at today.
Well, could I ask a question after that? So,
Go ahead. Jeff, did you have another comment?
Just to clarify on that term would never be allowed to be approved outside of the officers that were assigned, is the second part of that resolution.
I didn't follow that. Can we just continue to, I want to make sure I'm clear, Jeff. It's a good point.
That the negotiation that we allowed in the resolution, whatever the bond that was marketed, brought back to the table, that would never be able to be approved unless the officers assigned approved it.
Yes.
Yes, and that's a good point, and that's the way I looked at it, that the officers were, that BRA was saying the officers were the backstop to look out for the best interests of the BRA and for the city and for the citizens, if that's what you're saying. So yes, my view was that we could disapprove of anything that we saw that came back. And,
okay,
and also that we would also communicate and get input from the BRA individually or in some fashion.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not being fleeced or railroaded or duped at any point here. The second part of the second resolution then, and that was the totality of the summary of the first resolution. The second resolution being that the BRA would bring on a financial advisor to review whatever that bond, new issuance or marketed terms and conditions would be to help assist the officers in the BRA in that decision. Is that correct?
You're asking Mr. Danoff?
Yes.
So in my understanding, you authorized a financial advisor and to be hired, and certainly that person would become part of the discussion with such people as are appropriate, including your officers, as to reviewing the best way to market, the best way to get the lowest interest cost, and also to get the lowest interest cost with the lowest cost issuance. As I had noted before, if you add a lot of cost issuance and get a lower rate, you're not necessarily always ahead.
So, and I also viewed it as we could revisit any terms. We could revisit whether we're going to pay their fees, whether we're going to pay the 822, any aspect. Because the deal is a complete package. Anything that's in this package ultimately falls to the bottom line of the taxpayers in terms of the actual return.
So that's my question. I want to add on to that. So in addition to saying go out and market it, didn't we say it was the original issuance plus the 850,000 of overages plus 225,000 of developer fees, side fees? So that's the decision point we're getting to. If we don't have more discussion about that, then we're just expecting that Jim and Peter will make that decision at that point, right? Or whether those fees are appropriate or not. And that's where I'm getting some heartburn all along on this.
Right. My last point here, and then I will stop talking altogether. I just want to make sure that we're all crystal clear on what we as a board approved last meeting. And I feel very comfortable with what we approved. I think I commend all of you for the 3.5 hour long discussion that it took to get to where we were at. I don't think anybody here represented the city negatively in any way. I don't feel like any of you were duped. I feel like I'm among a very solid group of individuals who have nothing but the best interest of the city at mind. It is important for us to keep in mind also that, as was pointed out earlier, we're paying about $34.60 a day, adds up to about $103,000 a month. If we renegotiated today and got a better rate, let's say we were paying $2,000 a day instead of the $34.60, we would be saving about $40,000 a month. I want to make sure that we're crystal clear that waiting a month costs us $40,000. So when we, in layman's terms anyway, or in rounding numbers terms, I have no problem waiting 30 days. I just want us to make sure that we're all crystal clear on how much it's going to cost us to do so.
And as a follow-up, Jeff, great points. As a follow-up, since you and I are having this discussion, I guess, could we ask the developers whether their understanding is consistent that our executive team, our officers, can review any aspect of this transaction, including what fees go in and what don't, and including whether the 822 is paid up front or not, that we can review any and all aspects. I just
Direct Jim Croom's question to a member of the development team, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we commend full transparency. At the end of the day, again, this needs to be in the best interest of East Lansing. We fully support that. The only thing I would add is that, on the financial advisor, I would encourage you guys to push the private sector. I mean, they can do this quick. This is a big decision. I'm not trying to diminish that. However, we got some really talented people on the phone call with good lawyers and good financial accountants, and maybe you can expedite 4 weeks and turn it into 2 weeks. I think this is a good deal. I think it's an easy deal. I support full transparency, and this deal has to be the right deal for the city of East Lansing.
So in terms of transparency, again, that's different from allowing our officers under the resolution to approve any aspect of the deal, including fees that our city manager has talked about, including any aspect of the negotiation. We can revisit whatever is done or not done in the developer's mind. Is that correct?
I see a couple of hands here. Jared and Steve.
Jared, you go first.
Okay. Mr. Croom, I agree. So that's the short answer. Ultimately, any sale orders or anything actually starting to lock in this bond deal it is up to the signature of the authorized officers of the board. And everyone will be kept in the loop, including Mr. Fehrenbach and others. Whoever's assigned to sort of work with us will need the city's and the board's assistance as we move forward with this transaction for due diligence and discussions with purchasers. They're going to want to know certain information about the city and the board themselves. So there will be constant discussion as we move this forward, and ultimately it has to be approved by your or other signatures.
Can I jump in?
I'd like to make one point of clarification in regards to what was stated. So from a standpoint of transparency and involvement, so we're talking about the balance and the accrued interest related, as well as the issuance costs related to the 2017 bonds. That's a component per the memos. That would be a standalone item. So in regards to negotiating those amounts and paying those amounts out, that's a fixed issue. In regards to what would be negotiated, just in full clarity here, would be what the potential interest rate is, what the potential issuance costs would be, and then thirdly, would the additional 822 be included? I just want to be fully clear on what we're talking about in regards to levers that would be able to be maneuvered or moved.
And well, so that's a little troubling. That would augur in favor of a rescission of the motion and starting with a clean slate. Our city manager has said that even though the transaction costs, and I understand where you're coming from, on the original deal have been baked, that cake that was baked could influence our officers' view and the BRA's view on what fees we should pay this time. So,
which is well within your right in regards to the other fees. I'll let Dykema or Baird speak towards it, but from a standpoint of the bondholder agreements and the documents that were previously approved, as well as the intent of that was that all those costs would be included, and it was approved with an indenture, and then those would be taken out. So in regards to if that should impact your decision on how much issuance costs should be included in this refinance, then rightly so. I just want to be clear that that fund is that fund, and it's already been financed, approved, and drawn down on, and that's what we're looking to take out versus adding additional costs to our side of the ledger.
I agree with all that, and think that that's why I wanted to sort of get to better equity, if you would call it that, by reducing the new fees, because I understand that the cake has already been baked on the old fees, but now with the new fees, I think we could, if you want to use the term, claw some of that back and get to a better sense of equity for us. And I know the developer may not agree with that, but I'm just saying that that's my view on it, is that if the fees were paid, maybe at some point I can get an accounting of the legal fees that were charged for issuance, that $350,000, and see what the hourly billing was, and was it for all issuance and document review to issuance, or was it legal time sitting at the table during the development process? Because maybe that would give me more comfort. It's still a lot, but I might have more comfort. But my view would be, if there's $225,000 of new fees proposed, that the $75,000 legal fees we should take out, and the developer fees of $50,000 we should take out, $125,000 reduction, leaving them with $100,000 of fees or something like that. And perhaps that gets us to a better sense of equity in the future going forward. So,
George, just be careful on how you ask for that review. It could cost you the difference anyway.
Yeah, not by them. We could just look at the documents and see.
Mayor Stevens?
Thanks. I just like to kind of second what the city manager just said. I think he's in the right vein, and he's talking about, what is really the protection of the city and what fees we're paying. I just, I think we've had like a multiple conversations at this point around, what we've passed, what we could pass in the future, and where does that come in with having our own financial advisor, and having the officers be initiated to sign off on that deal, or having the entire BRA. And if I'm the only person here that might want to hold off and get a financial advisor, and then see from our end if we really should be paying some of these fees, if we shouldn't be doing this ourselves, or if we should be reconsidering that 822, then I'm alone in that, and that's okay. I'm only one member of the BRA, but if the sense is that other folks are having those thoughts, then maybe we do have this conversation on item 4.1 and have a conversation in a month. And Jeff, I do really appreciate your comments on putting some things into clarity on what that actually means. Because that is valid, and I don't know the math behind it. I don't pretend to, but I'll trust your judgment on that. But I do appreciate the clarity on that. But it is something that I'm still willing to consider. So,
if I can respond, Mayor.
Go ahead, Jim.
I don't think I've heard anybody indicate that all aspects of the transaction won't be looked at. All those elements that you mentioned. I think the issue is whether we go with the original resolution and allow the officers to do it, or whether the whole BRA does it. Is that your point? Because no one suggested we're not going to look at all of that. I think isn't the issue really who does that, and whether we want to move forward quickly, or whether we want to, sort of start over and let the whole BRA consider it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'd say.
Peter, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Who's that?
This is Tom Yaden. Can I give you some input
Tom,
here?
please. Yes, please.
With regard to the Mr. Kroom's observations about what he believed his decision-making power was as an officer, I have some concerns about that with regard to the Open Meetings Act. The OMA requires that all decisions of a public body be made in public by the body. So my understanding was that the BRA was setting the parameters for that decision making, so that those big weighty decisions would not just simply be made by the officers after the bond issuance. I have real concerns about, for instance, whether or not to wrap in that 822 in overages. I think that's a decision that needs to be made by the BRA in an open meeting. I don't think that the BRA should, in fact, leave that to the discretion of the officers when they're inking the deal. So my understanding was that that's what the BRA was going to do. They were going to make all of the decisions and then give those parameters to the directors, so their discretion was fairly limited to just inking the deal within the parameters set by the BRA. So that's my input.
Okay, well, thanks, Tom. That doesn't change my view, but crystallizes it. Because we need to be able
And
to revisit those aspects, and if we can't without a rescission, then so be it.
To,
and if
It
I
seems
may,
like the developer supported that.
Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to say that my understanding of the action that you took and the direction given in the motion was to include the additional eligible costs in the refunding bond. So I believe that's what was approved last week.
At this point,
And that was my understanding as well.
see if we can get support for that. So let's do a motion to reconsider.
Well, what I'd like to do, George, is since we have allowed the developer and their team to be panelists as far as this portion of the meeting, if there are any additional questions of the developers, I'd like to make certain that those are asked now, and then they will become attendees at this meeting, and we can have a much more thorough deliberation amongst ourselves with our bond counsel and with our city attorney. Okay. Are there any additional questions at this time for the developers team? Or does the developer wish to have any additional comments to share with the Brownfield?
I would just say thank you for your consideration of this request. And as Tom Fehrenbach stated, it was our understanding that we'd be working very closely with our team, your legal counsel, and a to be named financial advisor to determine the best course of action to proceed forward. So as Mark Bell stated, as well as the rest of our team, our intent is to get the best deal possible in regards to an interest rate as soon as possible. And as Jeff Smith stated, there is interest occurring on that. So as we talk this through and look at this, those are figures that we're aware of as well. And what we're trying to do is simply refinance this the same way any party would refinance your home or any other debt. We're trying to do that in a responsible way that's reduces the amount of total obligations for not just the city of East Lansing's taxpayers, but all the other taxing jurisdictions are included with the Brownfield plan. So I appreciate the discussion on this. I appreciate the openness of it. And thank you for allowing us to be a part of this.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. And if there are additional questions, we will invite you back into the meeting. But I appreciate your participation. So with that, I'll direct city staff to make the developers team attendees to the meeting. And I will go back to George. You had some comments that you wanted to elaborate on.
I just wanted to mention that we should do a motion to reconsider. I'm most comfortable. The reason of that is because I am not comfortable with the fee structure. And I think if we're going to authorize anybody to go out there and do that, we should have more discussion on the fees. I would recommend essentially cutting the fees in half from the developer side. And then I would be more comfortable with the developer, with us going forward with that approval. What alternatively is to bring it back to the full to the full BRA for approval. And I think, again, we could expedite that meeting and then we would all see it. And then we could have the comfort that it was done the way we thought it should be. This is a very important item, and I think that we should have the final approval.
I'd like to ask Mr. Danhoff or perhaps Mr. Yaden. I've been reviewing a lot of documents, as we all have, several hundred pages. We have statements from two separate legal teams, the developers legal team, Dykema, Miller Canfield, our bond counsel. We have comments that were previously offered by former Mayor Meadows and Council Member Meadows with regard to what was negotiated in 2017. There appears to be differences as far as eligible expenses. And I would like either Mr. Yaden or Mr. Danhoff respond to some of the comments that Mr. Meadows had made in his memorandum that was shared with you. And I don't know who wishes to perhaps weigh in on that.
Bill Danoff, I'm happy to start. We have provided a written memorandum. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Bill, thank you.
We have provided a written memorandum to you regarding really two issues. One is the use of the 2017 bond proceeds to pay cost of issuance. And the second was the use of interest on the bond proceeds, the use of monies on the project fund, as we say. What Ron Liscombe is on too. What we did was we looked at the documents as executed and tried to give you what we believe they said. We actually quoted those sections, and the eligible expenses for the project were limited to $24,389,518. That's right. But for the purposes of this agreement, that's what the Section 1B8 of the development agreement said, is that's a net number after you take off the cost issuance, underwriter's discount, the cost of interest on the money, and a debt service reserve fund funding, which I don't believe was done. So we just tried to go back and say, these are the documents that were signed. This is what it says. And we did the same thing with respect to the amount of increments that may be captured. Again, looking at the documents that were signed, that again, we got final copies from the city just a couple days ago to get that. So that's the purpose of this memo. Sorry.
Yeah, and Mr. Danoff, I appreciate that quick summary. I think for clarity for all Brownfield members, because we're processing a lot of information here, would you mind going point by point through those other than just kind of a quick overview? I think that would be helpful for many people that were not part of the Brownfield Authority when this deal was put in place 3 years ago. And it might be helpful as far as we make our decisions moving forward.
Very good. I would ask Ron if he would mind doing that. He's the primary author of this memo. And I would ask him, Ron Liscombe, if he could just walk you through the source of the information and where we got it and answer those questions if it's okay.
Ron, welcome. I don't.
Mr. Cummins, I think you have to unmute him. He's in the attendees. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Welcome.
You hear me now? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I was switched from a participant to just an attendee. So thank you very much. Yes. So at the request of city staff, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. At the request of city staff, we took a look at the documents that were approved by City Council in 2017 that approved the deal, the development of the Center City project. And that essentially included the approval of the Brownfield plan and the development agreement. Each of those items were approved by the City Council at its June 20, 2017 meeting. The development agreement was amended or addended a couple times thereafter, but the essential elements of the deal, and specifically in relation to the bonds, were included in the original agreement as approved on June 20. So the first item that was approved on June 20 was the City Council resolution that approved the Brownfield Plan number 24 related to the development. And that resolution referenced an Exhibit N contained in the development agreement with regards to what, my interpretation of that, when you look at all of the documents in their entirety, was really defining the scope of the project. The Exhibit N, and as it was approved in the City Council resolution, does not, if you look at Exhibit N as it was included in the development agreement, there are two.
I'm Ron, excuse me for a moment. Can city staff pull up Exhibit N?
Sorry for the delay. Mr. Cummins, I think probably the easiest way is I just emailed it to you. So if you want to share your screen and open that.
Thank you, Tom.
I know Adam is working feverishly to bring it up here, so just a few minutes would be appreciated.
It's a big document, so this takes a bit.
Okay. Ron, I don't know if that's helpful, but at least
Yeah,
we have
certainly.
something to review.
So the city council resolution just references the exhibit N. As you see, there are two different columns here, column 1 and column 2. Column 1 includes, if you'll scroll down, there are certain eligible activities starting at C, which include activities on Grand River. And then on item D1 includes demolition of existing buildings. And so those are the only two differences between the two columns. And so the city council resolution approves the Brownfield plan and basically says eligible activities can be anything contained on this page, okay? So it doesn't indicate, it doesn't define item 1 or item 2, column 1 or column 2. So there was no...
I have a question on that because it appears in Mr. Meadows' communication to city staff, specifically he's referencing the $50,217,825 that is the sum of column B, scenario, proposed Brownfield plan number 24, no Grand River eligible activities. And these are estimates.
Okay. So looking at the minutes of the meeting and the city council resolution that was approved, the city council resolution that was approved is a reference to exhibit N. It is not a reference to column 2, scenario A of exhibit N. That reference comes under city council agenda item number 10. And it's contained in the development agreement. And I can continue if you'd like.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, certainly. So, so if you look at, just moving on to the development agreement itself, the relevant language that we're talking about here is all contained in section B18 of the development agreement. And pardon me, I'm trying to just maneuver. I have my Zoom open on my laptop. I was trying to use split screen here, but I don't have it. So I'm just going to speak from memory here right now. But I think it starts around page 8 or 9 of the development agreement, where section B18 begins. And there's a specific reference in the development agreement, and I don't know if staff can bring that up. I think it would be quite illuminating to actually show that to everyone.
We can if you want to just give us a minute here.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, staff, for doing that.
And Adam, once again, I've emailed it to you for ease.
If it's okay, okay, perfect. So that's being brought up. Let me just give a little bit further description of the city council resolution as it is, described in the meeting minutes from the June 20th meeting. But essentially, it looks like there was some discussion on the development agreement during that meeting. This was agenda item number 10, which occurred immediately after the approval of the Brownfield plan. And there were actually some line item changes to the development agreement during the discussion that related to the amount and the commencement of the parking garage lease. So that, there was, it appeared to be some fairly detailed discussion of the development agreement and some specific changes made by city council during its discussion. But if you'll scroll down to about page 8. Okay, keep going. Keep going. So right there. So you'll see this section begins bonds or other obligations. And you'll see it starts, this is the portion of the document that governed what was done and what was paid for with the proceeds of the 2017 bonds. So it begins, with the construction costs of the infrastructure improvements and the parking structure shall be financed with the proceeds of the limited obligation revenue bonds to be issued by the Brownfield Authority. And then scrolling on, I'm going to just skip some. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but to be paid by tax increment revenues pursuant to a bond authorizing resolution approved by the board, subject to the Brownfield plan as approved by council resolution, and shall be further guaranteed by the developer. The Brownfield bond shall be without any recourse against the city or the authority, shall be issued pursuant to an indenture. This is the language here that I think there's been much discussion about. The bond proceeds will be used to pay for the costs of the eligible activities which are set forth in column 2, scenario A of Exhibit N. So that is clearly where the city council has identified the scope of the project. Whether that included the eligible activities to be conducted on Grand River and included the demolition of certain structures or not. But it's very important that you continue reading. The very next sentence says the net proceeds, not the gross proceeds, the net proceeds of the bonds shall not exceed $24,389,518, okay? Which is the project amount for the eligible activities on column 2 of Exhibit N. You'll see down, yep, there you go. And then switching back. So the net proceeds shall equal the par amount of the bonds plus any original issue premium, less any original issue discount, less costs of issuance, less any bond proceeds allocated to capitalize interest, and less any bond proceeds deposited into a debt service reserve fund. And then it defines the maximum size of the reserve fund, okay? So that was the language immediately following the sentence, which purported to limit the size and limit the use of bond proceeds to only those eligible activities. So clearly, I mean, you just have to read the very next sentence to understand that it was never intended for the bond proceeds to only be used for those eligible activities. You can go on. I mean, the next sentence, the next paragraph, talks about the event that in the event that, you know, there are additional eligible activities that are insufficient to pay, to be paid for out of bond proceeds, the developer shall make up the shortfall, and then shall be repaid out of remaining tax increment revenues. If you will, just scroll to the next page for me. Give me, if you can stop right there. There's a sentence at the end of the first paragraph that's showing regarding, this is very relevant to the amount of tax increment revenue capture. It says, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary in this agreement or in Brownfield Plan number 24, the maximum amount of tax increment revenue that may be captured is $55,952,038. That's reiterated in the very next sentence, so it appears twice in a row. The Brownfield Authority will authorize the capture and pledge of 100% of the Brownfield Plan 24 eligible incremental taxes for 30 years for payment of debt service on the bonds, and to the extent not needed to pay debt service on the bonds, to reimburse the developer for the cost of city-approved eligible activities, subject to the maximum amount of tax increment revenue that may be captured of $55,952,038. If you will scroll down to the next page, if you go to page 12 for me, and scroll to the bottom of page 12 and stop right there. And then it continues in case there was any lack of clarity. The last paragraph begins, proceeds from the sale of the bonds shall be used for the planning, design, financing, and construction of the city-approved eligible activities, funding a debt service reserve fund, paying capitalized interest, and paying costs related to the issuance of the bonds. And so, I mean, I think the documents as approved by council, one right after the other, are replete with examples and language that, you know, show that it was fully contemplated and approved explicitly that the bond proceeds would go to pay the cost of eligible activities and cost of issuance, and tax increment revenues would be used both to pay debt service on the bonds, to fund shortfalls in debt service reserves, and to pay developer advanced amounts for city-approved eligible activities to the extent that there were insufficient bond proceeds. You can even go down a little bit more if you'd like. Right here, this section, the indenture for the bonds will provide for the following distribution of tax increment revenues, and this you'll see is actually reflected in the indenture. For payment, so this is the allocation, the waterfall, so to speak, of the tax increment revenues. One is to pay debt service on the bonds. Two is to transfer deficits to the debt service reserve fund if that had to be called on to pay debt service on any principal or interest payments on bonds as a result of shortfalls in tax increment revenues in prior years. And then third, to reimburse the developer for debt service payments made by the developer on bonds, and that's without interest. And then because these first series of bonds were guaranteed by the developer. And then fourth, payment to the developer for city-approved eligible activities paid by the developer, not with bond proceeds, plus interest in the amount computed at a rate of 5% per year. And so all of that is currently reflected in the trust indenture for the 2017 deal. And so the only thing I would say is that in order to support the proposition that the only thing that could have been paid out of the 2017 bonds were the $50 million of column 2 scenario A expenses, would literally mean that you only read one sentence and ignored the other 243 pages of this development agreement, because they are in direct contradiction to each other. I guess I'll stop there and ask if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions of board members for Mr. Liscombe? I don't see anyone. I appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Did you wish to offer additional comments, Ron?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Okay.
Peter, I have a question.
Mr.
Peter?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
So in connection with bond issuance, is there an opinion of council? So an opinion of Miller Canfield to this effect? Is that something that's routinely given? Can you describe what opinion you'll be giving, if any? In other words, will you support what's in your memo and what was just indicated verbally in some sort of legal opinion so that ultimate purchasers of the bond understand what the amount should be and that it's a valid amount? Or isn't that relevant? Or am I off base?
I think we'll make sure the marketing materials, I would say, correctly reflect this. And with respect to the 2017, we already gave you our written opinion, unqualified opinion as to validity of the 2017 bonds.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there additional questions that Brownfield members have of either Mr. Danhoff or city staff?
I have one. This is Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff, go ahead.
Just want to make sure that we tee this up so we don't just have special meetings every week. If we pass a resolution to rescind our resolution from the last meeting and pursue, this bond issuance ourselves, I want to make sure we tee up the order of process here correctly. Does that mean that we also then need to pass a resolution for new placement and marketing agents? Do we do that now, or do we need to do that at another special meeting? Do we do that at the regular meeting? I want to make sure that we move at the frequency of which this is all going to dictate or ask for. So could use a little bit of guidance there.
It's a good question. I would think if that was the direction the board wishes to take, that we would address it all now. That would be my intent. Yes, Ruben?
Yeah, Peter, I had just a quick clarification question. First, it's two parts. First is on the expenses that we are looking at adding with time and delay. I would say it's unlikely that this is all going to be done in 4 weeks, getting financial advisor and additional legal counsel. So let's just say that's $30,000 a month of opportunity costs with the difference in the interest rate. Let's say that takes 2 months, that's $60,000. Additional financial advisor, we could assume is going to be somewhere around 100,000, since we know that it was 90,000 for their financial advisor. That's 160,000 additional costs. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And then what is it, 160,000 we're going to spend to try to figure out the 225 of refinance costs, or is it more like $1 million because we're also in question of the 822 of additional contractor eligible expenses?
I would say that's all going to be negotiated in the future. I don't know. They're very good questions, Ruben. That's just my opinion. That all of that would be examined in the future.
Am I right? Does it seem right about the, say, 130 to 160,000 of additional expenses by taking this out another month or two and hiring a financial advisor?
So quick question here. So I thought, to answer that, I thought the developer was going to need 6 to 8 weeks to market and sell these and get them done. So if we're doing that, if they're doing that concurrently with us hiring a financial advisor, then bringing it back to us with the opinion of our financial advisor, why can't this all be done concurrently? So they go out and market them. We hire our financial advisor gives us advice, comes back to us, we're ready to get final approval at the time when they're ready to close, which I thought was last week. They said 6 to 8 weeks or 8 weeks or beyond. Am I wrong about that time frame, Tom?
No, I think we're talking about two approaches here. One is the approach that was previously approved, which is as you described. The developers team would be empowered to go forth and try to find a deal, at which time we are concurrently looking for a financial advisor to represent the BRA. The deal then would come back, and the expectation of the financial advisor would be to review that deal and let us know if it's in line with the market or otherwise. The second approach that I think has been discussed here is it represented a change of course, and would be basically to rescind the previous resolution and contemplate a new strategy, whereas the BRA would take the lead in issuing the bonds and would pull together a team of not only a financial advisor, but potentially some other professionals necessary to market the deal. And in that instance, the financial advisor would be expected to advise the proceedings from the beginning. So those are the two, I think, strategies that have been outlined here, and they're as sort of separate approaches.
I think that. Wait, I'm sorry, George. Michael Krieger had a question, I believe. I'd like to go to Michael and then back to George.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, I was gonna kind of speak to what Tom was speaking about, and also to Ruben. If we are going to be paying the extra money to have our own financial advisor and possibly market the bonds ourselves and whatnot, aren't we then, taking away the cost of paying their guys to do the same thing? I mean, aren't we just sort of trading it out one for the other?
Well, that was my question.
So we're not really adding any additional cost to do
that
it.
Was my
in
question.
addition,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ruben.
That was kind of my question. Are we? Let's say it's 100. Let's make the assumption that we spend $100,000 on a financial advisor, as compared to their 90,000. Are we spending that 100 to negotiate the 225 of proposed costs and refinance, or are we spending that 100,000 to negotiate the 225 plus the 822? I'm trying to understand what we're spending and what we're trying to negotiate. Thank you, Ruben. Now let George respond.
I think that they're looking at the overall financial structure of it in addition to those issues, right? So does it make sense for us financially to include the 800,000 or not? Because the developer side said it does. So I guess there's arguments both ways. So I guess that they're looking at the whole financial structure, including those questions. But I still think potentially the right move for us is to have the developer continue. The only change with our prior authorization would be that they bring it back to our group. By then we have a financial advisor that advises our group. And at that point, we can see if we're okay with all the fees and costs and everything approved. If not, I would make a resolution at that time, potentially not pay their full costs, and maybe they disagree with that. But,
I think that approach makes a lot of sense.
This is Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
The only difficult component of that approach is the time is already spent on marketing and negotiating and placing the bond in the market. Those costs are sunk at that point. So we will incur costs associated with the work being completed there, regardless if we want to pass a resolution to pay it or not. Those are costs that are associated with work being completed. So I may be wrong in that, but
yeah, but we don't have to pay them if we don't. I mean, it's the issue of negotiation is whether we pay them or not, right? And
they're going to be negotiating the bond in marketplace. That work is completed. It'd be hard to say that they didn't do it if they brought a new bond package to the table for review. I mean, that work is completed one way or another. It's like saying that I'm not going to pay for the roof that's on my house.
Yeah, But if someone's going to charge a closing costs of $2,000 and we say, no, we'll negotiate closing costs of $1,000, that's what we're agreeing to. So that's what I'm comfortable doing, is saying last week they had a cost of 225,000, I think, or 226,000. I'm comfortable cutting that number in half because, as I mentioned, $75,000 for attorney fee, $50,000 for developer fee, $125,000. So if we pay $110,000 of costs, that to me gets to the equity of the prior fees we paid. So I think that's a way that I would feel better about the fees. And then if they don't want to do it, I guess we have that conversation now.
I may be speaking out of line here, but I feel much more comfortable saying let's hold off on moving forward on any work to be completed in the market until we have financial advisor on retainer, until we have somebody sitting there making a good, solid judgment on our behalf for all of this.
So then Jeff, Chair, do you mind if I
Go ahead,
respond?
no, go ahead. Mayor Stevens, go ahead.
So then Jeff, would you suggest then we rescind that previous motion and then hold off to pass a subsequent resolution until we have a financial advisor on our own?
I would.
Okay.
I don't think there's any harm.
I
don't think there's any harm in that at all.
Are there any other comments, board members?
I was just going to say, it looks like we're losing the 2 months that they could be marketing. And if they come back with terms that are favorable for everybody, this gets to Ruben's question about the fact that we're delaying 2 months. They've marketed it. Our financial advisor at that point might say, yes, everything looks great. And then we can move forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, George. I don't disagree with it at all. My challenge is if they do bring you back something that you don't like, we've burned through 60 days, and now we have to go to the market still for another 30 to 60 days. And it, all arrows at this point are pointing to, we're not yet sure. Go ahead, Ruben, I'm sorry.
No, I think the point of letting them proceed with shopping it out and getting a financial advisor alongside them is that we'll get more value out of the financial advisor if he's communicating with them during the process, rather than waiting 2 months, get the financial advisor, then let them shop.
My understanding from Tom Fehrenbach was that we're about 4 weeks out on getting, you got to issue the RFP, got to get everything back, and then we get the financial advisor. So we're going to burn through 30 days regardless, no matter which way we do here. So if we come back in 30 days when the financial advisor is on board, we've lost 30 days. And at the most, we're probably out 40 grand if we're looking at the daily interest rate. I don't think that's a large sum to be out. And if we're out, I mean, relatively speaking, $40,000 is a lot of money. So I would suggest that if we're out 30 days before that financial advisor comes online, it costs us that portion, but we say that in the cost of going to market together, or the financial advisor says, you know what, it'd be in the city's best interest to market this themselves. You would save X, Y, and Z. We may make up the $40,000 in the first 10 days, just in the realignment of what the advisor suggests.
Sure, and maybe we're all saying the same thing, but what's the point of waiting 30 days? What is the harm in letting them proceed if nobody can authorize? They can't authorize it, right?
It's going to cost us. I would argue that it's going to cost us all the time that they spend. The bulk of the time to get this placement in the market is going to be in the first 30 days. We're going to chew through a ton of, fees on their team. I'm not discrediting the developer and their team at all and what they're doing. I think they're taking the right approach because we asked them to. But if we're looking at the fee costs are going to be within the 30 days. Right. And it's going to be very difficult for us to not have to pay that dollar amount at the end.
Peter, can I?
Hold it. We're going to go to Jim and then Michael and then Mayor Stevens.
So I want to get clear in my mind, when we're talking about this burn rate of the next 30 days, the per diem, if we will, the per diem cost, you got to remember, and I think Vic Loomis pointed out in his comments, his surprise that it's being refunded this early. We have to remember that we could be sitting here and not looking at a refunding right now. and it'd be another year or two of that burn rate. So let's make it clear to the public and to the press that this is kind of fortuitous or a good thing that we're looking at it this early. So we just want to make that statement, unless I'm crazy.
I completely agree. If it weren't for the developer bringing this to our attention, we'd be a year from now before we'd be doing this anyway.
Yeah, we would have been fighting COVID and burning that burn rate.
Right.
We'll go to Michael and then Mayor Stevens. Michael?
I want to echo what Jim just stated. That was part of where I was going, and then also to respond to Ruben, and I guess the whole part here about the motion to rescind. Assuming we're letting the developer go to market over the next 30 days, does that not mean that we are going, that essentially would mean we're not rescinding the resolution, correct? And that we would be going forward with the resolution that was passed on July 9th?
No, because we haven't decided.
Right. So we've, what's that?
So you have,
okay. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding.
So you have taken an action on the 9th of July. That would set the parameters within which a deal can be brought to the market and brought back for the review of the financial advisor you've directed staff to procure, and then consideration by the officers of the BRA who have the authority by that resolution to approve the deal. In front of you today, and the purpose of this meeting is to consider whether you'd like to rescind that action or whether you'd like to amend that action and make changes to that prior approval. And you have, as I understand it, the ability to do either or to not do either. And so, again, you've put out two courses of potential action here, or really three. One is to do nothing at this point. Let the financial advisor representing the developer go to the market and try to put together deal structures with potential buyers. And concurrently, the staff is working as hard as we can to procure professional financial advisors knowledgeable in these areas through the issuance of a request for proposals and get them to explain to us how they can represent the BRA and what their cost structures would be. Once the BRA has determined who those folks would be, they would then be empowered to enter into conversations with the team marketing the bonds, get as much information as possible, and give their expert opinion to the officers as to whether this is a prudent deal for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So that's option one. Option two, if you rescind, then you're rescinding the action approving the resolution last week, and you can start from wherever you'd like to start from in terms of approaching a new strategy. Option three, if you amend the action from last week, you can make changes to the resolution, which is my understanding, which includes all the things that Mr. Lahanas was talking about in terms of making changes to the structure of fees, which you in your last action have limited to certain dollar amounts for certain types of activities. So those are the three, I think, courses of action in front of you, and that's the purpose of today's meeting as I understand it.
And then that third option, the third option would be putting it in the hands of Jim and Peter and George, correct? Like once we were to decide whether or not we want to amend it, that still then goes to the hands of those three to make the final decision.
Not necessarily.
Unless we amend it otherwise. Okay.
Yeah, that's material to the resolution that you pass, and you can make those amendments.
Right.
and have it be brought to the full board instead of authorizing the officers.
But under the city attorney's opinion, we'd have to come back anyway on the third. The third option doesn't seem attractive because you got to come back anyway to approve the exact numbers.
Well, so does it have to be, if we give the direction now to take out those fees from the developer's attorney, the developer's developer fee, that $125,000, and then you guys are simply with that authorization, the reduction of the fees, everything else is what the the BRA said, then you can, as long as the financial advisor agrees that this was in fact a good deal for the BRA, or the appropriate deal, right? And if
That's very, very true. Very true. But we may want to do something different, George.
No,
we may want more. What if we want more? What if we discover more information? I mean, what if it makes sense for less? So
I'm most comfortable with it coming back, and that's the motion I would recommend, because that's the one I recommended last time. But if they want to go with the executive team signing it, I can live with that if we reduce the parameters now so that it's clear what people are signing, and then I could live with that. But
gotcha. Thank you. That clarifies your.
Michael, go ahead.
I'm just, I'm going to get it out there. I'm going to make the motion to rescind the July 9th, 2020 approval of the resolution.
Second.
It's been offered by Michael and seconded by Mayor Stevens to rescind the resolution from our last board meeting. Discussion on that motion? Michael, do you wish to discuss your motion?
No, I think that all of our discussion sort of speaks for itself at this point. I think if nothing else, to put it out there and leave it up to discussion at this point and see where we go from here, I think was the best move. And I'm happy to live with a number of different ways to handle this, but I think taking it off the table right now seems to make the most sense to me. So.
Okay. I saw Jeff had his hand raised.
I actually wanted to get Ruben and George's opinion a little bit further from their comments earlier. I want to make sure that they're comfortable with the direction that we had discussed and just continue to get their thoughts.
I'm comfortable. I understand.
I'm good with, if we're able to give the same motion that we passed last time, except alternatively it comes back to the BRA if we're more comfortable with that, or have them authorize, but then providing that $125,000 of those fees would be reduced. So taking out the legal fees at $75,000 and taking out the $50,000 developer fee. I'm comfortable with that, with either option, bringing it back or having the executive leadership sign that, as long as that clarification is set. I would prefer to have it come back, but if it can't come, if the will of the group is not to have it come back, I would be comfortable and agree with it if that $125,000 was reduced from the developer side of the fees.
George, I believe the city attorney just indicated that was in direct contradiction of what our authority is.
I don't know.
To assign it to the officers alone.
Tom, could you weigh in on that as opposed to
Tom Fehrenbach?
Yeah. No, I thought it was Yaden.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom Yaden. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you can authorize the directors to sign it. It's just the decisions have to be made by the board. So, like for instance, you could say you can sign within these parameters as long as those parameters are set by the board. So the big decisions like whether to roll in the overages of $822,000 should be made by the BRA and not be left to the discretion of the board. But you could say, include this, don't include this, and then assuming the financial advisor approves it, we're authorizing you to execute the document.
Thank you, Tom Yaden. Tom Fehrenbach.
I may be confused, but I just want to clarify. I believe the motion on the floor is to rescind the prior action. And the discussion I'm hearing, though, seems to be relative to amending the prior action. So I just want to be really crystal clear in terms of what is on the floor and what what is your intention here as a Brownfield redevelopment authority in terms of where we're headed to a vote here?
Thank you, Tom. Jeff Smith, please.
Yeah, so clearly the resolution was to rescind. We seconded it. It's on the table. That is the discussion. The discussion and the comments that George had, I think, are just outside of the scope of that resolution. So I want to make sure that that doesn't interfere with what direction we want to take on that. My point on, can we get some clarification and some comfort from both Ruben and George was, what we had talked about was the concern over the 60-day window and what that might do from a pain perspective on the city. If that is not as big a concern, then I'm not concerned waiting the 30 days or 60 days it's going to take in order for us to get there. And to Jim's point earlier, we would not even be at this table discussing this had the developers not brought it to our attention and pushed it forward as quickly as we did, or as they did. It may cost us, some pain and some time and some potential savings between now and when we can bring that person on board, that'll provide reassurance on the bond. Is it possible? And I don't want to burden staff with any more to-dos because they're already swamped as it is. But is it possible to move forward on some of the items that are outside of the financial advisor, maybe the individuals who might be marketing and placing the bond? If we know that some of that work is going to need to be completed, if it's the city doing the work in the market, is it possible to move forward on getting those placed so that we can tee up the financial advisor and the individuals helping to get this product placed almost at the same time, or at least within a time frame that makes sense so that we're not burning too much time? I don't know if that's possible or not, or if that's even in the scope.
So Mayor Stevens.
So I just, I wanted to clarify one more time. I think I think this is a conversation that we have on the next item. I think that the motion right now is to rescind the specific thing that was passed last week. And I think that we have a conversation about kind of further action with the next steps. Jeff, by the way, I agree with you. That is 100% a conversation we should have. I think that we vote on this and then we know that we need to have further direction in the future. I'm looking at Tom Fehrenbach to corroborate what I'm saying if that's not not accurate.
Well, again, I'm confused because I think we're talking about three different things here, all under the same umbrella. And I mean, I feel that what you're really talking about is a motion to amend the action. So
we want to do, that's what I'm trying to get to. Easiest way just to say, let's make this a motion to amend. If that's what we want to do and not do rescind and start over, just do motion to amend instead.
Well, as far as a matter of point of order, we have the motion offered by Michael Kruger, seconded by the mayor. So we have to at least address that. But I believe, Kristen, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Well, I guess that's what I was asking for, was a point of clarification or point of order, because it does sound like we're rescinding something that happened last week to only amend it.
Right. So yes, Michael.
Well, I guess part of the reason to make that motion also was to Jeff's point, to hold off until we have a financial advisor to consult us on the issues. And so I don't know if that could be a part of an amended version or not, but the whole point was to get it, essentially take last week's, get that part done, and then we can start either fresh or wait until we have a financial advisor, or however.
Is it in last week's amendment? Is it in last week's resolution that we're seeking our own financial advisor?
Yes.
Yes. So just to be precise, the action last week authorize the parameters for which a deal can be constructed, set limits on the developer's representatives' fees, and directed staff to obtain, to procure a financial advisor, which we have been working on an RFP to get out on the street and get responses back for your review as soon as possible. That financial advisor in that scenario is expected to join the conversation as the developer's financial team has already begun the process of trying to structure a deal and find buyers, and would be expected to review the deal. So that's what was approved. And what we're talking about here is two different things now. We're talking about either we amend that resolution and make some changes to the fees, make some changes to other aspects, including whether we want to continue with the officers being authorized to sign the final documents, or which was approved in the previous version, or whether we want to bring it back to the full board for approval. Those would be amendments to that previously approved resolution. The second thing we're talking about potentially is to rescind the action previously, cancel the entire resolution, start over, and continue the thrust of finding a financial advisor for the BRA, but have that person begin the process and presumably have the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority be the issuing agent or take the lead in marketing the bonds and selling them. At which point, I've been asked the question, can we procure the other people that would be necessary to make that transaction go? That would be outside of my expertise in making in answering that. I believe that is something that the financial advisor would help find those right people and give guidance to the BRA in terms of those things. So that is my understanding of the kind of the three options that you're considering right now. What's on the floor from my perspective is rescinding and canceling the previous action.
Michael.
And to speak to just my motion one more time, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of point in setting up parameter of fees for the directors if we're gonna need to run them by a financial advisor at some point anyways to see if it makes sense. Like, why not do that first and get the best advice possible before we have to bring it back to the full board anyway?
Peter, Jim Croom?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, it feels like, and Tom and others, Verenbach, have made good points. When we rescind, we're going to be rescinding the whole resolution. I think if the will is to rescind, I think after that we can take a look at last week's motion and build back in what we need, like the hiring of a financial advisor. That's about the only thing I heard that we need to build back in, but
that's not my understanding. I thought that was already built in that.
This is Jeff. My understanding is we passed two resolutions during that meeting. One was for them to go to the market to negotiate for us. The second was to hire a financial advisor.
Okay, great.
And that with this discussion is around rescinding the first resolution. I voted twice, so it couldn't have been a part of one resolution.
Thanks. I'm refreshed now, so we wouldn't need to build that back in. So rescission would just give us a clean slate.
Correct.
Freedom to negotiate, freedom to take advice from our financial advisor on whether we should run the deal or not. Freedom on everything. Okay.
Without having to adjust the second part of that the second resolution.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Are there any additional comments?
Can you just read the first resolution that's being asked to be rescinded, if it's just the first resolution?
Tom, can you read that, please?
So
Because it
so
may
my
have been
understand-
amended. Go ahead.
My understanding, so there's an actual resolution that is part of that item, and which was drafted by Miller Canfield. I believe when Mr. Smith is referring to the resolutions, he's referring to the subsequent motions that were made as part of the actions related to that agenda item. So from my perspective and in the draft minutes documents that we have not had a chance to finalize, since this is happening and iterating quickly, my understanding is that your actions last week were to approve the resolution as drafted by Miller Canfield. Also, you set limits for the cost of issuance for the following, for essentially the developer's representatives. You set those fee caps, and you authorize staff to go and seek a financial advisor. Those are the three sort of actions that were related to the action item. Within the resolution, you set the parameters, the max parameters for which the bond deal can be issued, and you authorize the officers to be the authorized agents to approve the bond deal. So if you now take a motion to rescind the approval of said resolution, you're rescinding, as far as I understand, and I will need the city attorney to help me on this, but my understanding would be you're rescinding all three of those actions relative to that action item and starting from scratch.
Yep.
Tom Yaden, will you comment on Mr. Fehrenbach's statement?
Yes, I mean, if it was, my memory is not that clear. My recollection was it was all wrapped into one motion, so you can't partially rescind that. If you're rescinding the whole resolution. Nothing stops you from then just making a motion to subsequently to have staff continue to pursue the financial advisor.
So Jeff, the outcome may have been that we voted twice, but only because we voted an amendment to amend the original resolution. That might be what you're thinking of.
Possibly, but all right. Yeah. I mean, in either case, let's rescind it, start over, approve the financial advisor, and move forward.
Good.
Well, this seems like a really roundabout way to just, well, I don't know why we don't just, well, we do have a motion we need to address. I'm going to be voting no on rescinding because I think we just simply amend it. We have a resolution, we have a process, but that's kind of my opinion. But we can call the question, and if Adam or Chad will take the roll call, please.
So I'll take the roll call. So the motion is to rescind the approval of the resolution on July 9th, 2020, which authorized the issuance and delivery of limited obligation tax increment revenue refunding bonds. So Dewan?
No.
Kroom?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Levinson?
Sorry, yes.
Levinson? Hackney?
No.
Clark?
No.
Lahanis?
Yes.
Kruger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
And that passes on to 6-3.
Mayor Stevens.
I would now like to make a motion to instruct staff to continue with the efforts to hire and acquire a financial advisor to advise us on how to proceed forward with this bond issuance.
Or
It's been moved by Mayor Stevens. That's just a direction of staff. It's not a required motion.
Then that's fine. If it's not a required motion, Mr. Yaden, is that correct? It's not a required motion.
Yeah, you can just staff can just
Okay.
be given those directions if that's how they want to proceed.
This is
Yes,
Jeff.
Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't mind making it canon that we're asking and directing the board forward towards securing a financial advisor for this, rather than, because what we've potentially done is rescinded all of the action of that resolution to include the financial advisor potentially. I want to make certain that what Stevens is suggesting here is that we're trying to ensure that that part is still moving forward.
That is my intention, yes.
Ruben?
I would jump on that too, that I think it's important that we not just rescind with no further notes or action, because what message are we leaving for people that are going to be putting this news out there again? What are they think we're not doing anything now, or?
Okay. Any additional comments? Any other items that we need to address? Unfinished business?
So could I just quickly ask a question?
Yes, George?
So is that going to be the totality of our action today, is to hire a financial advisor? Or are we hiring a financial advisor in addition to having people go market bonds? I thought that was the direction we were going with all of this.
Yeah, I thought we were rescinding it so that we could start over.
Just say, hire a financial advisor, ask the developer to begin issuing bonds. Then when it comes back, we could give parameters. And then when it comes back, our financial advisor will review, bring it back to us. And then we all make a decision at that point.
I would agree with that.
So are you offering that? I mean, I want to make certain that we're not missing a procedural step. Are you offering that in the form of a motion that we're directing?
I guess I'd ask Aaron first, or the mayor first, if we want to pull yours back, or do you want to do this as one thing, Mayor? Or do you want to do yours first? I just didn't know if that's the totality, or are we having another step, or should this all be one big motion, or how did you envision it?
Give me a kind of a, I can go with a friendly amendment to my motion if you give me some language that you would suggest, because I understand your point is trying to make sure we're moving forward with it.
I was just thinking that the developer, along the same lines we did before, instruct the developer or permit the developer to move forward with marketing of the bonds. We give specific direction on what is includable in terms of the costs. From my perspective, you know what my view is. And then we say that it has to come back to us for final approval. And by that time, we have our financial advisor advise us, and then we can get this all done in one big package, hopefully within 2 months.
So thank you for that clarification. That was not my intention with the motion. My intention is more along the lines of what the Commissioner Smith had said in regards to hiring the financial advisor. And then when we get to our meeting where we actually have that person on our staff, or not on our staff, but with the BRA, then we go forward with a resolution authorizing the sale of bonds with specific clauses for fees and overages when we have that advice. So that was my intention. Although I did just simply say move forward with the financial advisor, so that might not have been clear. So I apologize.
Jim, you're muted.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that. I thought we were going to ask the financial advisor what the prudent way to go is, because we're uncertain whether it's wise to allow the developer to run this transaction or whether we should run it, and draw on the financial advisor's experience to tell this board what is the most prudent way to go for the city.
Thank you.
Do we add? I'm sorry.
Kristen.
The prior one that we rescinded talked about setting limits. So do we add in here the acceptance, or do we address the 824,000 in change orders and the 225 in fees? Or are we just talking about the 225? We're not talking about either of those things at this point.
I would say we're not talking about any of those.
To advise us
on that. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just saying that's the idea of having the financial advisor advise us on whether or not we should be including those in all of that tip anyway. So that's why it's not on this motion specific.
Okay.
Okay. So the comments that are offered by Mayor Stevens then are added as a friendly amendment to the action that we have just taken. Is that correct?
Yeah, but if you had indicated that it doesn't actually need to be a motion, if that just needs to be an instruction towards staff, then that's okay as well, and I'm willing to take back my motion.
Okay.
I don't know whether that needs to be in a form of a vote or not, and I'd look to the city attorney to
Why
answer
don't
that.
we just go ahead for the sake of clarity?
Okay.
And
Okay. Yep. That's fine.
so you've offered the motion for all the various parts of evaluation and hiring a financial advisor, and it's been seconded by, I think, George.
No, someone else did it, I think.
I'm sorry, Luke. And let's do a roll call vote on that. Tom?
I'd like to hear the motion.
The motion, as I understand it, is to direct staff to proceed with procuring a financial advisor to guide the BRA in terms of next steps for the bond reissuance.
And to allow the developer to move forward marketing the bonds simultaneously?
No.
They're two separate. We're separating them. Okay.
I don't know if we're doing it at all.
So
No.
the resolution that you rescinded in your prior action was the resolution that set the parameters and allowed the developer to move forward. Now the action that you're considering with this vote is just a direction to staff to move forward with obtaining responses to an RFP relative to financial advisor who can guide the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority in the reissuance of these bonds.
So this is essentially us not doing it concurrently. This is us saying we're going to get the financial advisor, wait. When that person is on board, then we have this discussion again, have them or us issue bonds with parameters, they advise us. That's what we're doing now. So we're deciding not to do it concurrently is what it sounds like now. I can live with that. I would have preferred to do it concurrently, but I can live with that if that's what the will of the group is. So
Yeah, I thought that was counter to what Ruben was saying with opportunity costs going, we lose the months of them continuing to work towards it. And so I guess I'm still a little confused on that.
Well, and then when I asked what's the harm in letting them continue do this at the same time, Jeff had another point that he thought it might actually add costs to us if we're covering their costs. So I hadn't thought of that. I don't know if that's possible that we would have to cover extra costs or not.
I think if we limit the cost to what we say the costs are, I guess that's the decision for them to go market them or not, right? But I think if we limit the costs, then they can do all the costs in the world they want.
So we can vote on this motion. We can vote on this motion and then consider other things.
Right. Yeah. Let's vote on the motion, and then if we want consideration of them marketing, let's make that a separate discussion.
Okay. So are you ready to vote, Mr. Chair?
Why don't you?
So the motion.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. The motion is direct staff to proceed with obtaining a financial advisor. Dewan.
Yes.
Dewan. Kroom.
Yes.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Levinson. Hackney.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Clark. Lahanis.
Yes.
Kruger.
Yes.
Stevens.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Okay. Is there subsequent action the board wishes to take or a subsequent motion?
This is Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
My only concern with taking additional action as it pertains to the developer is we run the risk of a slippery slope where we may set the parameters of fees, but that doesn't fully uncover the concern over what the scope of the bond is that they'll be marketing on our behalf. there's still some ambiguity of what the entire package looks like. And that's, I think, why we are at the position we're at, where we've needed to rescind. The concern I have is that even if we offer up the opportunity for them to sidecar this deal and try to get it done quickly on the outside and see what kind of offerings that they can bring to the table, the concern is the parameters of the deal that they're negotiating and marketing is still fairly ambiguous. And that's my concern when it comes back to the table, is not only are we going to then have to be faced with the not to exceed amount on the fees, but the concern over what did they just market for us. So that's my hesitance in doing anything at this point other than getting a financial advisor to kind of represent us at this point.
Tom Fehrenbach.
If I may, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that you can set those parameters as part of the bond authorizing resolution, and indeed was what you did with your last action in terms of both setting limits and caps for the various representatives of the developer, as well as making a determination to add in the eligible cost that exceeded the original issuance. So my understanding is you can decide to cut that ambiguity out as part of what you put into the bond authorizing resolution, and you can give direction to staff and bond counsel today in terms of what you'd like to see in that issuance, or you could, I believe, you can give advice and counsel to staff and counsel in terms of the range of what you may want to see and what you may want the financial advisor and the team to negotiate as part of any bond deal that's structured.
Did you have a follow-up comment, Mayor Stevens?
No, I think that what Tom just said was apt, and it's kind of up to the action of the board at that point. Because what he is saying is, basically we could make a motion with specifics in that resolution that we want to see as parameters. And then, either way, we're going forward with hiring a financial advisor to help us out. And it's really the decision between, do we wait to hammer out those specifics until we have a financial advisor on our side, or do we come up with those specifics right now? I know Mr. Lahanas had suggested some in relation to fees. I think we would have to have the conversation on the 822 and other things as well. And then, we would hammer that out in a resolution right now, but that's up to the board. I at this point, I wouldn't be willing to make a motion for that. I would wait until we have somebody as a financial advisor to tell us, or not to tell us, but to advise us on where we should go. But that, of course, is just my opinion. So other members are free to make a motion.
Are there other comments?
This is Jim Kroom. I concur with the mayor's comment.
Okay. Any others? Michael?
I also agree with Mayor Stevens. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of point in putting parameters around something before we talk to somebody else. So.
Okay. Is there any additional action we need to take then? I don't see any communications from staff.
Thank you. No report.
Yeah. Any announcements or board member comments? Michael?
I just wanted to make one comment with regards to what happened today. And, I think that ultimately what we're trying to do is what's best for the city and what's best for, for the developers in some respects as well. I know that they want to get this off their books. And, we certainly want to work with them to do it. But I think that we just need to make sure that we're doing it in the correct way and taking the correct steps to make sure that, the taxpayers are being represented fairly. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Any other board member comments? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Yeah, Luke wanted to say something.
Oh, Luke, I didn't see you on my screen. I'm sorry, Luke.
That's okay, Peter. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to follow up too, just because I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably the last meeting that we will have Mr. Eden on. Where are we at in terms of seeking independent counsel, and are we going to be vulnerable anytime soon in terms of legal action if we don't have counsel when we're going through, these next
Eden will be representing the city until October.
October.
So we are covered in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions, comments, statements from board members? Yes, Jeff.
I just want to point out the amount of time that we have spent discussing this item and these items. It is not taken lightly. If you were to add up the professional hours of all of our time, and we are all volunteering here, I would greatly appreciate, and I do greatly appreciate as much conversation has gone into this. And I know that you've all received countless emails and texts and Facebook posts about this decision. I don't take it lightly, and I don't at all in any way, shape, or form feel like I was strong-armed into a decision or to change my mind in any way. What I do feel is that we were presented with an opportunity to save the city some funds on this bond, and it was presented to us by the developer. And we are at a point now where, it's going to take us another 30 to 60 days to get a financial advisor on board, which will cost us some opportunity cost. But in the grand scheme, it may be in our best interest to take a little bit of more time. I do feel like it was fairly rushed to make the decision. And I do appreciate that we were able to take a hard review on this, and that we were willing to make a difficult decision on this.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I'll offer a motion to adjourn. Ask for a second. It's been seconded by Michael. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Peace and love. Peace and love.